this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, to guide us through this journey of shedding light on the link between slavery, colonialism, and racism is Dr. Simon Mary Asese Aihiokhai, Assistant Professor of Systematic Theology at the University of Portland, Oregon. Dr. Aihiokhai was born in Nigeria. He received his undergraduate education in philosophy at the Spiritan School of Philosophy in 1997. He began his initial studies in theology at the Spiritan International School of Theology before migrating to the United States of America to continue at the John Seminary, Camarillo, California. He earned a graduate degree in theology with a focus in medical ethics in 2007. He obtained his PhD in systematic theology from Duquesne University in 2013. Dr. Aihiokhai is the coordinator of the university's Theology Thursday lecture series. But I would say thanks to the time difference, we are not taking him away from that engagement today. He has worked extensively with communities at the margins in Nigeria and in the United States of America. As a product of multiple contexts, he is intentional at creating spaces for multiple perspectives in his research and teaching. His research focuses on religion and identity, African approaches to ethics, African philosophies, cultures, and theologies, religion and violence, comparative theology, themes in systematic theology, and interfaith studies. Dr. Aihiokhai has been published by Routledge, Palgrave Macmillan, Pauline Press, Oxford University Press, Cambridge Scholars Press, and several peer-reviewed national and international journals. His next book explores the contributions of women of color to the women's suffrage movement. Dr. Aihiokhai will gladly tell you that at the heart of all that he does as a theologian is to create space for God's life to be experienced by all in our world. At his leisure time, he can be found playing with his blind Siberian husky named Hope. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce to you our guest speaker, who I would proudly say was a secondary school classmate of mine, Dr. Simon Mary Asese Aihiokhai.
Thank you very much. I'm like,
sorry.
You all may be surprised I've not seen him for more than 20 years. Yeah.
Prof, sorry, can I just quickly say that if it's okay for us to mute our mics, please?
Oh, sure.
Yes, and it's just to say that this presentation is being recorded. So if you don't want your beautiful face to appear in our video, you can sort of turn off the video. And in terms of questions, I think we will be able to entertain 2 questions. But if you've got questions here, be free to type them up in the on the chat side of this of Zoom, or you can email us, or you can message to the questions to us on Facebook as well. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you very much. I was saying that I've not seen him for over 20 years, so it's a long time. Thank you very much. I want to thank you for inviting me to share my few thoughts with you on these very engaged topics. As you know, when you go and get a PhD in one field, discipline, reality and experience lead you to expand your horizon and your research interests, and that's what has happened to me. The topic you have asked me to engage, I would like to go back to a time in history which many of us might have forgotten. It was the great debate at the city of Valladolid in 1550 to 1551 between De las Casas and the Sepulveda on whether the Indians were human beings. And if they were human beings, were they capable of receiving baptism? And then if they are capable of receiving baptism, then it delegitimizes the agenda of enslavement. And so a lot has been said about that debate, but there's something that has not yet been said. The debate from its onset was invalid from the point of view that the agency of the Indians was taken away from them. They were orderized, and in the orderization of their reality, even de las Casas, Bartolomé de las Casas, in trying to engage, come to the defense of these Indians, did not allow the Indians to be the agents of their own reality, to voice out their own reality. That was where we got it all wrong. Eventually, the Indians were left out of enslavement, and then Africans were introduced into the Americas, which de las Casas eventually regretted to have encouraged that, because he felt that the Africans had the disposition for hard labor compared to the Indians. But this notion of otherization of the other is something that we always have to keep in mind in trying to understand how racism operates, how colonialism operates, and even how slavery operates. Because once I otherize you, I no longer encounter you in your own pace and your own terms, then I can manipulate your reality. And so, in my research, I have begun to take seriously the study of whiteness. And when I say whiteness, I don't mean white persons, because that's some of my friends, when the interlocutors, when they encounter me, is like, oh, you mean I, a white person? That's not the issue. Whiteness as an operative mode of being in the world does not necessarily need white bodies for it to function. Once it has been planted in the society, it articulates itself, it defends itself, and it operates. It literally is like a virus. And then it can wipe out all the white bodies, but yet it will still operate. That vision of whiteness will still manipulate and continue to manipulate the society where it's operating. And that will help you to understand what is happening today in the continent of Africa. I'm going to go there briefly today. So whiteness as a mode of being in the world is traceable back to the transatlantic slave trade and all that went with that. Yes, it was articulated by white persons, but its articulation comes with this worldview of scarcity, saying that if you look at the economic order, for example, if you look at the economic order, we have a principle of saying that we don't have a lot of resources. And so you have to do the notion of demand and supply and all that. That vision itself legitimizes manipulation of the other. So if I don't have enough food, so I said I'm not an advertiser of Starbucks. I just want to wake up. This is morning here. So if this is all I have, use this as an example. If this all I have is water, and there are about 100 of us here, immediately once I say this is all we have here, then 100 of us will begin to manipulate each other in order to have access to this. And so what happens, if it means my killing you to get access to that water, I'm going to do it. So that worldview itself is how whiteness operates and legitimizes itself. That the world does not have enough resources. And so we have to be smarter in order to push away those who are not smart enough and get access to those resources. And once you operate with that white worldview, you cannot delegitimize whiteness, because you have already accepted the very principles by which whiteness manipulates and operates. But what if you think the other way? In a work of mine I wrote recently, I articulated it. I said, okay, what is the corrective measure for this? Maybe we have to re-engage societies that were not influenced by the Enlightenment tradition, and look at the economic systems that operated there. So I decided to go back into pre-colonial African societies. And then you now realize that this is not the only principle that human beings have articulated. There's also the principle of surplus, flourishing. So if I say, this is the water that we have, and we are not complete unless we all partake of this, it's a different result, outcome that we're going to get from that. So we now predispose ourselves to share. But whiteness does not believe in sharing as a mode of being in the world. And I repeat again, whiteness does not refer to white persons. It's a way of positioning oneself in the world. And that is why Africa, post-colonial Africa, let me give you an example. Ghana, for example. Ghana gained independence in 1956, I believe. And then Kwame Nkrumah preferred to address himself as the Moses of his people, and which is okay. But did Ghana succeed when Britain left Ghana? No. Did Nigeria succeed when Britain left Nigeria? No. And why is the case? Because whiteness as a mode of being continue to operate in these societies. And that is why I love the work of, what is his name, Aihiokhai, who says, the beautiful ones are not yet born. Looking at Ghanaian society, and then he just realized that there are no good ones. Because the vision that whiteness articulated for the Ghanaians during colonial era was a vision of scarcity. And so the Ghanaians, the British left Ghana. The only transfer change that occurred were the occupiers of the bungalows, the colonial bungalows. It was replaced by indigenous people, the Ghanaians. But the operative model of colonialism continued, which was exploitation. But now it's exploitation of each other. This is the fundamental principle defining post-colonial realities today in Africa and also in our world. So I want to go to this notion of racism. Racism is a construct. There's nothing called race. First of all, no one is white. No one is black. The others are just constructs. But why do we need those constructs? It's because of this operating principle of scarcity that whiteness has articulated and legitimized and says there are not enough resources. And if there are not enough resources, then we have to be strategic. And how do we become strategic? We have to validate ourselves intellectually, epistemologically, hermeneutically, in order to have access to those resources. Then racism becomes a construct to manipulate the other, to manipulate society. But now there's something I have been engaging the decolonial scholars, and I think one of my audience partner there might be conversant there. I see Michael Lumame is somebody who we follow each other on social media. So I want to talk about coloniality of power, coloniality of knowledge, coloniality of being, and coloniality of imagination. And then you'll understand how these tools that racism, colonialism, and slavery appropriated to legitimize their agenda in our world. Coloniality of power, when societies like African societies or indigenous societies in America, the first experience they had was the coloniality of power. When the Europeans came to North America, the first thing they did was to quickly state who had power. So coloniality of power says that the society that is being colonized cannot have power over themselves. So power has to be redefined and manipulated in such a way that the one who is entering into that space, the colonizer, determines the contours of what it means to have power. This is very simple. When the Romans came to society and they conquered the society, the first thing they did, they took power from the society over life and death. The one who has power over life and death is the one who has ultimate power in that society. That happened also in Africa. That happened also in the Americas. Britain was very good at that. In Nigeria, for example, That was very clear. When they came in, they created a new social order. They created new laws. And then even to today, for example, in Nigeria, you have that reality. You have 3 legal systems operating at the same time. The civil law, which is British law, and then you have the Sharia law, which is Islamic law in the northern part of Nigeria. And then you have the customary law, which is the indigenous law. But that is the least recognized of them. It's only allowed to address issues of land dispute and all those basic stuff. So once you don't have power, you can't, and when I mean power now, I don't mean ability to go and shoot people or carry out wars. I mean the very ability to define yourself. Then you really have no right over your body anymore, over your destiny. This is how colonialism roots itself and legitimizes itself. This is the first stage it does. The second stage, and that becomes very dangerous, is the coloniality of knowledge production. If I were to ask you, what do you know? You were going to tell me everything you got. You went to Cambridge or you went to Oxford or Edinburgh, which is beautiful. But what if I told you that everything you studied there, you're just being colonized? You really did not get education. You were really colonized. I'll tell you a story quickly, and then this will give us an insight into where I'm going with this. In 2004, I was working in one of the largest parishes in the city of Los Angeles, in the Catholic Archdiocese of Los Angeles. I wanted to celebrate the Thanksgiving that year. I wanted to celebrate the multicultural realities of this parish, this church. It had 68 countries. The people who come to this parish, 68 countries represented. And so I was supposed to give the homily or sermon that day. And so the pastor we were processing into the church. The pastor tapped me, and I had my microphone on. I didn't even know it was on, and said, "Simon, by the way, I didn't want you to feel alone, so I put an icon of Jesus, a black Jesus, on the sanctuary." So I looked up at the sanctuary, and immediately what came out from my mouth was, "That's not Jesus. Jesus is not black." Everyone turned around and looked, and it was from the black guy, the church, that those words came out from his mouth. But that's not the issue. 19 years, for the past 19 years prior to that day, I have educated people into the Catholic Church, educated them in the faith. Some of them are priests today. I literally was at the heart of the system of this church, and I was going to be ordained the next year. But yet, in my subconscious, I did not believe that God would identify with my blackness. And that was a wake-up call. I began to ask myself, what type of education did I receive? What type of theology have I been taught? And I really began studying theology in 1985. And this was 2004. 19 years of studying theology, different engagements. First of all, as a diocesan seminarian, then as a monk, then as a missionary, then back as a diocesan seminarian. Did not believe that God could identify with me in my blackness. That was when I woke up to the coloniality of knowledge. My knowledge production was colonized. It was always an alienating knowledge production. The more I knew, the more I was disembodied, the more I was distanced from that, whatever it was called knowledge. And that was when I began to deconstruct everything that's inside my head. Everything I called the holy was really alienating. And that is coloniality of knowledge. What happened in colonized societies is this. First of all, colonialism operates by saying that you are uncivilized. You are not just you're uncivilized, you are incapable of producing knowledge that can bring you out of barbarism into the world of civilization. Hence, the colonizer is there as the benevolent, charitable, kind, knowledgeable presence, who really is just being charitable, doing it out of the love for humanity. That's coloniality of knowledge, how it operates itself. So colonialism cannot be validated if the colonizer recognizes the knowledge production of those being colonized. Then the question becomes, why are you there? Why are you in these people's space if you really believe that they are capable of knowledge production? It's not possible. So what happens then? Everything about the colonizer has to be demolished. Of the colonized has to be negated. And this exactly is how coloniality of knowledge operates. This is exactly the founding principle of colonialism. So for example, when Leopold II of Belgium argues for him to have a right to go to the Congo, to bring Christianity to the Congolese and educate them from barbarism into civilization, he gets his way, because colonialism operates with the fact that the colonizer is the one with the authentic knowledge. And even till this day, this coloniality of knowledge still operates in itself in our world, in the academy, in the space I live in. What is knowledge? How do we validate knowledge? How do we say that what you are doing is knowledgeable? When you get your diploma, you have a PhD and you're all dressed in those funny looking robes and you're all rejoicing. What does that mean? The person on the street, the homeless man and woman, don't they have knowledge? Can they produce knowledge? Are those valid knowledge? These are the questions. So the conversation today is that we have to deconstruct the academy. Even this notion of sociology, anthropology, they come from this coloniality of knowledge. What is anthropology? Because non-Western societies are still regarded as societies that are not societies. Therefore, we have to study them as cultures, the anthropological study. But Western societies, those are societies, so sociology has to be the tool for engaging them. So the discourses, even the language, the labels we use in the academy are languages and discourses that come and validate colonialism. Now I want to get to another point. I hope I still have time. I can talk forever. So I want to talk about coloniality of being. Who are you? What makes you human? These are the contours, the very essence. I began this conversation by going back to the debate at the Valladolid debate in Spain between de las Casas and Sepúlveda on the humanity of the indigenous people of the Americas. Coloniality of being denies the fact that the one who is being colonized has the power and the ability to define their humanity. Hence, how do you gain your humanity? The colonizer defines the contours, the boundaries of what makes you human. This is the crisis of theology, in my own opinion, in my own discipline. The crisis of theology is that no matter everything we talked about, we are made in God's image and likeness. When it came to the praxis, Christianity failed woefully. Christianity could not come to the defense of the other. In fact, some of you might know this. It was the medieval practice that baptism prevented you from slavery. So the Christians could not enslave fellow Christians. Muslims could not enslave fellow Muslims. So how did you enslave the people? You denied them their humanity, therefore making it impossible for them to be baptized. And so if they are not baptized, then you can enslave them. This happened a lot in South Africa, in apartheid South Africa. The Dutch South African church rejected the humanity of the indigenous people, therefore making it impossible to baptize them. And so if you don't baptize them, then they are not humans. And if they are not humans, then you can enslave them. This also was a very common practice in the Americas. In the slave plantations, the the African Americans were not baptized, because to baptize them was to humanize them. So the whole language of we are ontological humanity, we are made in God's image and likeness, fell apart because of the economic interest. So today, we looked at George Floyd's, the crisis, George Floyd, the killing of George Floyd. It took me, literally, I had to go into therapy, called my therapist to process it. When I saw the clip, it was just too much for me to handle. But the question I asked is, how was it okay for somebody to put their knees on another person's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and the person is begging and crying and calling on their mother that died 2 years prior to that incident? And no one cared. The police officer did not care. It's because of this ingrained historical tendency to deprive humanity from the other. This played itself out in Nazi Germany. Holocaust studies, if you look at genocides, the study of genocide, there's always this phenomenon in genocides. Before the genocide occurs, there's the dehumanizing process of the other, the otherization of the victims, the would-be victims. And so in Germany, what happened? The Jews were always presented by every label possible except the human label. This also happened in Rwanda. In Rwanda, what happened? For years, the Hutus were calling the Tutsis roaches, cockroaches, and other explicit terms, but never humans. And so when you dehumanize the other, they no longer have the human face. And once this human face is gone, then violence is legitimate. You can carry out violence against the other. Like Levinas, Emmanuel Levinas will say, to see the face of the other is to encounter mystery. And when one encounters mystery, the only demand that mystery, the other, compels the subject to is, thou shalt not kill me. But Hitler studied this very well. It took time to dehumanize the Jews. And when they dehumanized the Jews, it became very easy to liquidate them. And that is happening today in our world. And so what does racism play out? Racism says that you, who is not the benefactor of racism, is not human enough. If I told you are human, maybe 1/3 human and so on. In the history of the United States, the Supreme Court in the 1800s passed a law that said that African Americans were 1/5 human beings. So if you are 1/5 of a human being, then the violence is legitimate towards you. It's legitimate to carry out violence against you. You're not fully human. And so that's why I'm saying, when we say we are a Judeo-Christian nation and all that, it's a chastisement, an indictment of Christianity. Because Christian theology falls apart. At the heart of Christian theology, it's not that we are going to go to heaven, blah, blah, blah. It's the humanity, that God became human like you and I in everything except sin, Paul will say. So if God became human, whose humanity? Who embodies that fullness of that humanity? Racism says white persons. Patriarchy says men, heterosexual men. So the other is always diminished. Women. Yesterday we celebrated, 2 days we celebrated 100 years of women's right to vote in the United States. Women are still trying to catch up in this country. So the question then comes, does Christianity even understand the paradoxes of what it's teaching about humanity, what it means to be human? This is the crisis of theology today, I say. That if we don't get our anthropology correct, everything about Christianity falls apart. Really means nothing. In fact, I teach a class called God and the Human Person in a very radical way. And my students come to class, I give them a survey to fill out. At the beginning, they tell me, oh, this is what it means to be human, blah, blah, blah. By the time we finish the class, they get more confused. They're like, I don't know. I'm like, yes, that's the point. To be human is to be mysterious. Levinas says the other always escapes the conceptualization of the subject. There is this apophatic, or what I will call it, the mysterious dimension of the human. To want to reduce you to black, white, all I am encountering is an idol, no longer an icon. Because you are just not white, nor just not black. You're a mystery. What is human is to be mysterious. But if we appropriate the mysterious, then power and authority can no longer manipulate the mysterious. This is the crisis in Christian theology. How do we hold power here and also the mysterious here? How do we negotiate that? Many tend to embrace the power. You find it in early Christianity. When the Montanists came about, the spirit-loving ones, what we call the charismatics today, what did the institutional church do? They clamped down on them immediately. Because if you engage the spiritual, then the authority of the church is diminished. And so we tend to engage, the hierarchy, the magisterium, at the expense of the spiritual, the mysterious. So that's that. Then I want to talk about another aspect, because I know you are just not here to talk. Listen, you want to gain insights on how to continue this good and holy work that you are doing on your island and in Scotland and in the UK. I want to talk about coloniality of imagination. And this is the most dangerous aspect, in my own opinion, that plays itself out today. Once your imagination has been held captive by the other, they can control you. It's like a remote control. They don't even need to be present. They can manipulate you. That's why I said whiteness doesn't need white bodies to function. It just needs to articulate its principles and what we have planted there. And then anyone who buys into it is held captive by that. And that's why I told you the story of my experience in the church some years ago, and how it dawned on me that I was literally embracing and articulating, celebrating a colonized theology. Imagination is the pathway for which we articulate new horizons and new visions of progress, of justice, or even of what it means to be human. Once your imagination has been held captive by whatever ideology, until you are helped out of that imprisonment, you cannot get out from it yourself. The crisis of Africa today is a crisis of imagination. In African societies, colonialism ended, at least in Nigeria, 50 years ago. Sudan, South Sudan, a couple of years ago, maybe about less than 10 years ago, but they are busy killing each other. Why? Because there's lack of imagination to imagine a new way of being society. And so what happened? Colonialism tells you you have no past, and that the past you had is not human, is barbaric. And so what do? They suppress the past. Your access to the past is literally impossible. And if it is possible, it's only like a traumatic memory. You only remember pieces. It's not a systematic engagement of your past. And once that happens, you don't know your past. You really cannot articulate what is happening to you right now. And so what do you appropriate? You appropriate what you know. But what you know is what has been fed into your subconscious by the agenda of the system that has been planted into your society. So that is how coloniality of imagination operates and manipulates itself. So the first victims, you will be shocked about what I want to tell you right now. The first victims of coloniality of imagination are not Blacks, are not the colonized communities. They are white persons. You'll be shocked why I said that, and I'm going to explain that. For centuries, at least in this United States, for centuries, white persons have been taught and told that they are this, they are that, they are that, they are that. There's no reference point for them to access and critique what they are being taught. The textbooks they read in the classrooms are cooked up textbooks. They talk about slavery, they talk about it like in a paragraph form, like, oh, it was just nothing, not that serious, blah, blah, blah. And then once you have no reference point to engage these issues, you really cannot critique yourself. Everything I'm sharing with you today, if I had lived in Nigeria my entire life, I would not have been able to articulate these things I'm sharing with you today. Why? Because when I came to the United States, I had a crisis of identity, crisis of faith. I couldn't comprehend what was going on. First thing I said, there must be two heavens, one for us Africans, the other for the Americans. And the better one is the African one, because I could not understand. I would go to church. In Americans, they're always talking about resurrection, resurrection. No one is talking about the crucifix, the crucified Christ. No one is talking about Good Friday. And I'm like, they don't fast. They always eating and going to receive communion. I was like, they're all going to hell. Then I said, okay, maybe let me be generous. They're going to heaven, but a different heaven, not the one I'm going to. That was a crisis of identity I was experiencing. But it took me a while. One day it dawned on me and I literally screamed. I was like, oh, I get it now. There are two sides of the same reality. Yeah, in Africa, we emphasize the crucifix because all we know is suffering. Here in the United States, they talk about the resurrection because they don't experience that type of suffering that we have go through in Africa. Then that was when I started understanding and having the tools and the skills to be able to engage my own roots and look at it with a different angle, from a different perspective, to understand how I was raised. That is lacking in the world that has been created for white person. Take, for example, in the classroom, I have students who will tell me, I don't have culture. I'm like, what do you mean? It's very typical. I always get that. My white students will tell me they have no culture. I'm like, what do you mean you have no culture? Everyone has culture. Do you understand what culture is? Oh, no, but I thought culture is for like Indians, Africans. I'm like, no, we all have culture. It's a way of being. You cannot live outside of culture. It's quite interesting. At first, I thought they were just joking until I spent time, I started reading about it. I said, oh, these people have even studied this. Because there's no reference point. So what I said in the work, I'm working on a project right now, and I'm articulating and saying that whiteness, this notion of scarcity, does not only operate in the way whiteness tends to engage narratives of economic narratives, global economic narratives. No, it also has an anthropological notion. So, and they also a hermeneutic notion. They say almost there's no surplus or a rich approach to meaning. It is always A or B. And I want you to pay attention. I want you to, from now on, once you go, you listen to the media, I want you to pay close attention to this, what I want to share with you. How does the Western media explain global issues? Very simplistic engagement. For example, oh, it is the bad ones. Oh, like I remember a few years ago, I had a conversation with an American scholar. It's like, oh, it is the Iraqis who are tribalists that are the ones who are causing their problems. I had to call the person out in public. It was at the conference. I was like, I could as well just listen to a very conservative news media for this nonsense that's coming out from your mouth, because this is not real analysis. You're a reductionist. Because of this notion, it is so difficult for whiteness to be comfortable with nuanced and complex analysis. And why is that difficult? Because to hold things in tension is to prevent oneself from manipulating those things. So once I say it's white or black. It's so easy to manipulate it. Once I box you into an ideological, an identity, I can manipulate you. And this is exactly the machine that whiteness uses to manipulate the world. But unfortunately, the first victims became white persons. And so in the United States today, the question is, how do we get out? How do we help white persons out of this mess? People have articulated, like Robin DiAngelo, a scholar, a sociologist, has articulated this notion of white fragility. And that white persons, because of this notion, and though she articulates it, but she doesn't go too far. So I'll be generous enough by giving it to her. And what I want to say, I will also give it to her, even though that's not her thought, that's my thought. It's fine with me. She says, when you start talking about these things, the white person has been taught that they are morally good people. It's not a problem. But how do we hold, I've been taught for centuries that I'm a morally good person. With, my ancestors did all these things, all this shady stuff. And I'm living in a society that has been, everything is done to favor me at the expense of the other. Therefore, I must be a bad person. They quickly leap to that conclusion that they are bad people, and that makes them uncomfortable. But they can't understand that, no, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means that you're a victim of a system. You're a victim of a system that your ancestors put in place to favor you and their descendants, but is now working against you. Doesn't mean you're a bad person. I literally spent half of a semester trying to convince my students they are not bad people. You are good people. It's just that we have a system that screwed all of us up, and we can get ourselves out of it together. So let's not think we are bad people. And so scarcity, once you have that anthropological notion, this anthropological notion of scarcity, then you begin to appreciate and literally appreciate the dilemma that white persons face today in our world. In fact, what Robin DiAngelo calls white fragility, a colleague of mine was just sharing with me last week in my department. I was saying that, you know, a psychologist has literally said it's not a fragility, it's a disorder. And that we really need to look at it from a psychological point of view. It's very predictable. If I just want my audience to react, there's certain things I will say and I'll get their reaction exactly what I want. It will just manipulate itself because it's how they've been conditioned. And so once you lack imagination, you cannot get yourself out of what has held you captive. How do we then get out? Create new imaginations. You have to have crisis. In Christian theology, they call it catharsis. You have to have a crisis that literally destroys your foundation of meaning making. If I ask you, what do you like to eat? You tell me, oh, I like to eat this, oh, I like to eat this. Who are you? You say, oh, I am this person. It's just, let me give a very simple example. Who is your dad? You tell me, oh, your dad is this person. Who is your mom? This person is your mom. Oh, they are lovely people. Oh, yes, I think they are very lovely. And then what if I came up one day and I brought your DNA test and said, sorry, this person is not your dad or your mom. Who is your dad? Your mom? Hitler is your dad. What are you going to do with that? You'll be like, what? Hitler is my father? That's loony. Yes, that's your dad. What do you do with that? That is a crisis. And so that's very extreme though, but I just wanted to use that as an example. So if Hitler is your dad, what do you make out of that? That means you have to now literally step by step go back through, examine your entire life, unpack it. That is a moment of grace, not of crisis. Crisis allows us to grow because they destroy the chains that hold us together. And once those chains must be destroyed, we must fall apart so that we can be put together again in a way that is life-giving. And I am thinking, I might be wrong, I am really thinking that the crisis the United States is facing today from the death of George Floyd and from the, pardon my language, from the crazy president that we have, Donald Trump, it is a blessing for all of us. Because for centuries, the United States has believed itself to be a privileged and exceptional society. And here comes this man called Donald Trump, as crude as he can ever be, one can ever be, as barbaric as one can ever be. And yet he claims to be the president of the superpower of the world. And he's a racist. In the past, Americans did not believe racism existed. They thought it was all fake or people were just hyped up. So what do you not do with that? The myth of American exceptionalism has fallen apart. And that is a great opportunity for us to now reimagine ourselves as a nation. So that's why I wanted to say, engage this, the same imagination, the coloniality of imagination. Yes, it serves whiteness as a word of exploitation of the world, but it's also a crisis that white persons experience. Because there is no way one can explain how somebody will put their knees on another human being's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds until they die. There's just no, it's not logical. How do you explain that? Because this person is held captive by an ideology that says that the person that they are kneeling down on their neck is not human. That's the only logical explanation. So if they can do that, then how do we help this person? He has to experience some form of crisis. For him to now understand that what he has been taught, the police officer, what he has been taught in his entire life, is not right, it's not correct. Something's missing. Because, unfortunately, because of our interrelatedness as human beings, your lack of humanity, denial of your humanity is a denial of my humanity. As much, insofar as African Americans are denied their humanity, white Americans have not yet experienced their own full humanity. It is only together that we can appreciate our collective humanity and celebrate it. And that is why I want to warn, and I'll end my comments with this, and then I take your questions. I really want to warn everyone who wants to hear me and listen to me. Do not use the tools by which our society has been messed up to liberate our society. It doesn't work that way. We must reimagine a different society, and that society must embrace and celebrate everyone, white persons and black and whatever. The liberation of black people must never be done at the expense of white people, because if you do that, you are appropriating this notion of scarcity again. It is only together that we can be truly and fully be human. Anything less is another ideology replacing the old ideology. And this time around, the new ideology will be more dangerous than the old ideology. Thank you. So I'd like to take your comments or thoughts, or even your reaction. I love that. I always tell people, I love when people tell me, no, you are wrong. I'm like, I love that. Thank you very much for sharing that with me. Oh, Sam, go ahead. I'll take only as much questions I can take, so don't worry. Sam, go ahead. Oh, she can't hear me. Theo, could you moderate the questions? Because I see hands up.
Yes, have we got, sorry, how would I, just a minute.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. If you've got, just unmute your microphone, please.
Yeah, and EEH or so.
Yes.
I didn't have a question. I was just reacting to the talk.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I have a question, if that's okay, I can ask.
Sure.
Thank you so much for this fascinating talk. My name is Asra. I'm from Kuwait, and now I'm doing a PhD in Scottish African Studies in Glasgow.
Lovely.
And listening to your talk, it's very much connected to my own research. and connected to the vision of my university. So Glasgow is trying to decolonize the curriculum, decolonize the academy, and also decolonize the library. And through that, they have a new project called Decolonize Glasgow. So they do talks annually, and they're trying to bring more books about Black literature and Black history. Beside that, they're trying to fund researchers that are connected to Africa and Blackness. And I'm wondering, because at the beginning of your speech, you were talking about what does a PhD do? Why does it matter to have a research degree, to wear whatever you wear at graduation? So I guess I guess my question, because I do find myself wondering about this occasionally. So my question is, what else can we do? What different or what more can we do? How can we do it differently and better? This is my first question. The second question, talking about having a crisis that will make you reevaluate your whole identity, your whole truth. So I can't stop thinking about connecting this point to abolitionists and how to be an abolitionist and what does it mean? And is it a better system than, for example, communism and socialism and Marxism? How is this? What are your views on these concepts? That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that a lot, your questions. First of all, those gown and hood, those funny looking attire, they are cute. I must say that. I wear them only once a year or twice, beginning of the academic year and the end of the academic year. No, what I will try to say is this. You need, for me, getting a PhD just gave me the boarding pass, the key into the room so that I can say what I want to say. And no one, and they'll give me the microphone. I cuss them out, and I go my way. I'm kidding. I don't cuss people out, but it allows me literally it validated my interest. I always wanted to engage the global issues, and so a PhD allows that. But that I don't think that PhD is the only thing that creates that space, because I have friends who don't have PhDs who are even smarter than me 10 times. I must tell you that, and I learn a lot from them. But I think I love what your university is doing, but it needs to be more than that. It's not just it's still a benevolent approach. Oh, we have to go and bring the Black voices like books into the library. No, that's lovely. But we can be more radical than that. So what is the vision of what the academy needs to look like? We really have to deconstruct what we mean by knowledge and knowledge production. All that stuff. Like I say, multiple voices must be allowed at the academy, and we must suspend judgment. And once you begin to evaluate those voices, then primacy of one over the other is legitimized again. And then your other question is, you're asking me what my take about communism and all that stuff. They are all still operating with this vision of scarcity. That's why they are problematic. That, oh, communist is bad, so this one is better. Oh, this one is good, this one is better. No. We need to articulate. I always say there's nothing wrong with communism. There's nothing wrong with capitalism. What is wrong with society is when we say that these people are not good enough, they are bad, so they have to push to the margins, then we have a problem. Capitalism is wrong today because it's on steroid. You have the capitalism that has gone on steroid. That's why there's a problem. Then you have communism that says that denies the flourishing of the individual and the individual's ability to articulate himself or herself. Then there's a problem with that, because we all have different talents and different interests. So we have to create space for society to allow for those to flourish. So I think these ideologies that are giving birth from the place of hate cannot lead to the liberation and flourishing of all humanity. We have to engage ourselves and say, you know what, Cecil Rhodes, who literally made billions at the expense of indigenous South Africans, and say, Cecil Rhodes is still a dear fellow and worthy of love. That is the mystical dimension of what really can transform society today. Anything else, I'm really very skeptical about them. I am very skeptical about ideologies that literally are not inclusive, radically inclusive. Yeah. Good. So thank you very much for that. I think I see some hands up, questions. To what extent do you think colonialism, racism, and alienating impacts have been outsourced to the multinationals and woven into the operating principles of Western democratic institutions? Where can the church begin some forms of remediation? What are you doing as a theologian? Oh, okay. Okay, good questions, Michael. First of all, the whole global order that you and I have been thrown into is still a manipulative order. It's still a very manipulative order in the sense that, let me give you an example. The World Trade Organization is the most shady organization you can ever encounter in the world. It passes, it's so secretive. When you have a case against a country has a case against another country, it takes its case there. It does not even know how the case is tried. No one knows anything about this thing, but yet everyone is forced to sign to it. Why is Africa, for example, poor today? It's not because Africans don't have wealth. They have wealth, but the global economic order today, if Africa continues to embrace it, can never come out of poverty. And so how can Africa come out of poverty? The whole economic order has to be abandoned. But again, if you abandon the economic order, will Britain have the so-called economic comfort it has today? Absolutely no. Will France have the comfort it has today? Absolutely no. Are the French, the British ready to live a life they've not been living for centuries? They're not ready. And that's why I keep laughing and say, I love these young men and women who are on the street demonstrating every day for racial justice. The issue is not race alone, it's economics. Are these young millennials ready to stand on the line like any other person and wait for their turn economically? No. Then what are they fighting, demonstrating for? A myth, the myth of racial justice. So for example, France, for example, the former French African colonies in French colonies in Africa pay independence because they gained independence from France, have to pay $500 billion each year to France. How do you explain that? These are countries that they can't feed their people, but they have to pay $500 billion, the total of it, to France for gaining independence. Haiti is bankrupt today because of what France did. To recognize Haiti's independence, Haiti was forced to pay ramification to France. So how do we explain this? The economic order is cooked up. Now you're asking me what the church has to do. This is where I become very critical of my own tradition. We failed woefully when the church spent all its energy condemning communism and failed to engage the evils of capitalism. It was at the end of the papacy of John Paul II that John Paul II called out the evils of capitalism. But by then, we had already destroyed one enemy that could have counterbalanced capitalism. So, for example, some of the bishops in the United States and the so-called powerful Catholics, conservative Catholics, are totally against the papacy of Pope Francis, because Francis delegitimizes and calls out the hypocrisy of capitalism, Western capitalism. So the church, theologians have not yet started talking. In Western theologians, they are so good at talking about individual sin and homosexuality and other stuff. They will not engage these social issues, global economic issues. You have this Western theologians do that. And those who do that are considered to be at the fringes of the system. So that's what I will have to say on that. Who else? And I think I can take one last question, then that will be it, just to respect your time. Oh, go ahead, Koila.
Hi. I've just actually written something in the chat, which I'll post anyway, but
Yeah.
because I have to leave. I just wanted to say thank you very much for a really wonderful talk, and that imagination is how we form our world. Nothing, we cannot form anything until it is real to us.
Yes.
And I think we probably know that within ourselves. We have to make something real within ourselves before it can happen. So if our imagination is entrained by some other thing, then that really does squash our potential, basically. And that was it. And thank you very much.
Thank you. You said it very well. Lovely. Thank you so much. So I want to thank you very much. I know it's time, not so? Yeah. So it's been a pleasure talking to all of you, and also that you took me seriously. That's lovely. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yes, Simon. George would want to say something before you go.
Well, I just wanted to, on behalf of everybody who's listened to you today, I just really want to thank you for taking your time and for such an amazing, inspirational speech that's certainly made me think. Yeah, I mean, think about the way we think our education is chains on our own minds and thinking about how we can use other thinking and other experiences to try and break out of that. So we really thank you for giving your time for free, and we will take some of what we've learned today and look at what we can do in Orkney to make a difference, and elsewhere in Scotland and elsewhere, because obviously we see we've got people from lots of different places. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I should unmute everybody to clap.
I'll talk to you on. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Many thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Absolutely brilliant.
Yes.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, we'll keep watching the Facebook page, etc., and the social media, and we'll be doing other meetings, other events, and other demonstrations.
I have a quick question. Where are you going to upload the recording?
I've never worked out how to do that before, so I will, but we will put it on the Facebook group, the link on the Facebook group.
Can we consider this speaker for the conference that we're organizing? Yeah, I think so, Raggy. I think that would be really great if we could. I need to do some more work on that, though. I've been very busy with other things, but yes, definitely.